I would say we've had some phone calls. Yeah, I'll keep those phone calls to the vest, but we've had some phone calls, yeah. Listen, there's a handful of players, anytime you're at the top of the draft that you would deem generational talents, and we certainly feel that way this year as well. Well, it's a real skill set of talent, an impact player that can take the team to another level, whatever position it is. And then they also have to have the character makeup as well to go with it. Yeah.
How did that shape you taking this job? How did you evaluate this process? How you
I was there for 16 years, so, we weren't just going to Super Bowls every year when I first got there. So, in 2012, we had a 2-14 season where we had to, rebuild it. So, yeah, there's some things throughout that process that I'll take, just in terms of building the core positions that you need on the roster, offensive line, defensive line, and then also just getting, trying to build the culture right, too, to try to get the right type of people in there as well, people who are smart, tough, dependable, selfless players, team players. So that's what we're looking for right now. I'm sorry? Yeah, Abdul's a very good player. I don't want to go into many evaluations of the players, but like I said, there's certainly some players at the top there that fit that description of generational talent.
We saw firsthand what the Buccaneers did to the Chiefs and Mahomes, and then you see what the Eagles have done.
Mm-hmm.
Does that kind of skew the level of importance you weigh on the trenches?
Well, I think it's always important. You can have Superman back there, and if you don't have the protection up front to protect, to be able to run the football, to be able to create balance in the game, that's the most important part, is building through the trenches. So offensive line, defensive line is going to be a big priority for us.
When you are fielding those offenses, what are some of the things you are looking for?
Yeah, we really haven't gone into too much of that. I've fielded some calls at this point, but we really haven't gone too much into it right at this point. Yeah.
What have the last couple of weeks been like leading up to this week and consider the top positions in this?
So to answer your first question, the last few weeks we've been in meetings the whole time, draft meetings, free agency meetings, going over our roster as well, meeting with the coaches. So it's been a busy time. In terms of the strengths, I'd say obviously defensive line, specifically the edge players. It's a really deep draft. I would say running backs, it's a good draft. There's some good tight ends in that position group. So I think it's a good draft overall, but there's certainly some positions that more strength and a little bit more depth in the middle to later rounds as well.
This team spent a lot of capital on offensive line. Does that factor in at all to what you do going forward, because it hasn't spent a lot of capital at other positions?
No, not necessarily. I think we're starting this off on a clean slate right now. And offensive line, like I said, is going to be a top priority, whether that's through free agency, the draft, or anything, waiver claims, trades. We're going to look onto every avenue really to add to that group. And I think the most important part too is adding the right type of players to that group too. So that's a tight knit group, that offensive line. So getting tough guys in there, smart, dependable, good teammates. The characteristics for that group are very important.
You talked about wanting to add draft capital over the next 2 to 3 years to build this team. But in the interim, there may be a veteran quarterback or two who can become available, but the team might want draft capital for them. Does that make you more reluctant to pursue a veteran quarterback if the team wants draft capital?
Yeah, I think that's the goal we stated to like I said, draft picks are our biggest form of currency. So, we're always going to try to gather as many picks in the top 100 as we can. But we have to be disciplined through the process here, as we're going through and looking at free agents and, possible trades. We certainly want to hold on to our draft picks as much as we can. I'm sorry? Yeah, obviously get off. the ability to dip around the edge and just having a relentless passion to get to the quarterback is a big part of it. So those qualities are, the things that we're really looking for.
Don't take a quarterback when you have the number one pick. You never know when you might have that selection.
Sure, I mean, you can think that way. But, at the end of the day, we have to make the best decision at this point for the Titans. And if we deem like taking a quarterback is the most important thing right now, then we'll do that. But we have to go through this process here. So this is like one touch point in the process. We've gone through the whole evaluation part. Now we're finally getting to sit down and meet with these guys and talk with them. We'll have pro days. They'll have 30-day visits. So we have to go through the whole process really to make that decision.
Do you abide by kind of a height, weight, speed characteristic by position? And when do you stray?
We do. We always have. You don't want to make exceptions at certain positions. So we'll have a profile for each position. Now, you never want to just throw away a good football player if he doesn't fit those measurables. But we certainly have profiles for every position in terms of, when we're making acquisition periods, whether it's free agency or the draft.
Trading down further, getting more shots at the apple cart. Is that something?
Well, that's part of the strategy that you have to put together. Just like we're going to have a free agent strategy, there's going to be a draft strategy too. So we'll get together as a group and think through all that. But you certainly don't want to pass up on one of those players if you think they're there. And an opportunity to trade back, depends how far you can go back to get that player. So to your point, there's a strategy to it.
How would you define, because one of the things that came up was being selective for free agency. How would you define it? You look at this organization last year, they spent a lot of money, didn't necessarily work out. What's your approach to being selective?
Well, I think in the press conference, our philosophy is we want to draft and developed. That's going to be our number one thing, number one priority. But to be selective is just to have discipline in the process. We're going to have targeted players that we want. And if sometimes, that player doesn't come to us, we're not just going to jump to the next player. We're going to have players that we're going to target, and you have to have discipline throughout that process as well.
In targeting those players, though, there could be some big ticket guys. I mean, obviously you have more holes than you can fill, no matter what you might end up with drafting.
Sure, Paul. I think that's part of the strategy too. We're trying to fill, probably as many holes as we can before the draft, and you're trying to see. At this point, you have a free agency board, you have a draft board. You're trying to see the depth in free agency and the depth in the draft and where you might be able to acquire those players. But you certainly want to try to fill as many holes as you can in free agency. And, we have some work to do on the roster.
What you do at quarterback in free agency, might that tip what you're doing with the first pick?
I don't think that will depend. I don't think those will go hand in hand. We could sign a quarterback in free agency and also draft a quarterback as well. Depends on the situation. The places I've been, we've always had, older quarterbacks kind of mentor the younger quarterback. It's almost like another coach in the room for them, just to kind of show them how to be a pro, teach them all the little things about protection and just how to study opponents. That would probably be a priority for us if we did end up drafting a quarterback. Yeah. He's a special player, yeah, for sure. We were watching him, and I don't know if there's anybody that's actually done what he's done in the modern day football, playing both offense and defense during the course of a season. So he's definitely a special player.
When you look at this roster, you talk about all the holders. Where do you see strengths on this roster right now?
I think we have some good interior guys right now with Sweat and Simmons. There's some pieces on the roster. Calvin's still a good receiver. But we have to get better throughout the offensive line. And that's going to be a priority for us. And that's part of the process here, too, is we're evaluating this roster, is trying to figure out, where are the weak points right now? Where do we really have to improve? But there are some pieces on the roster that we can build on, and certainly that interior defensive line is one of them.
How long before you can compete for a division?
Our hope is to compete every year for a division, Paul. But it's a process. So hopefully we're in contention this year. You always want to manage expectations, though. So, as we go through this process, we acquire players. I think we'll have a better idea as we head into the season. I think he could. Yeah, I think he could. You've seen it. You've seen tape of it, and playing, corner and receiver. So, I think he can do both at a high level.
How was that when I go with the evaluation overall? Did that change how you maybe view some of the players that are later on in this draft, or maybe some of those generational guys that they moved and even kind of hot?
Yeah, you take every drill into account. It's really just a validation of what you see on tape. Does the guy run as fast as you think he ran during when he was playing during the fall? And then it's almost like a red flag system too. So if there's some certain drills that they don't do well, that causes you to kind of go back and do a little more work in the tape to make sure you've seen it right as well.
As you're evaluating, I guess, free agents, what's the balance like? You have these guys come in and also trying to get some people who've been with them in the past, whether it's Ron or other guys with strengths.
Yeah, so that was part of the process over the last few weeks, is really because we're trying to get everything done at once here, free agency, draft, and we met with the coaches during lunch during these times just to get a feel of the players on the roster, specifically how they are in meeting rooms and everything else. So that's a big part of it. We met with Brian and his staff over the past month here. I think we're in good shape right now. Yeah. Yeah, I've been there before. It's arguably the most important position in sports, the quarterback position. So you have to get that right. We have to solidify that position. And we have Will on the roster right now, and he's going to compete with whoever we bring in. We have one quarterback on the roster, so we're bringing people in, and Will compete with them as well. If he's a generational pass rusher, I just like him to rush the passer, at that point, just play to his strengths. But now if there's a guy that can drop in coverage, that's great. But, if their strength is rushing the passer, that's what we want to see him do.
Hey, Mike, a couple more. Daylight February for the scouting process.
Yeah.
Just wanted to get your take on what those past weeks have been like during the no daylight time, and how you feel about how far you've gotten as a group together.
Yeah, it's an important time for us. You get in, early in the morning before the sun's up, and you're out of the building when the sun's down. So that's what he's referring to, and it's going into darkness, is what we call it. But it's an important time just to build camaraderie with the staff, creating bonds with the staff as well. And so we did that for the past months, which I think was great.
Last one, what's the status of your draft board at this point in the process? Have you started putting something together?
Yeah, so we set the board the first time, and we call it phase 1. And I try to tell the scouts, listen, this isn't the final process. We have a lot of information to gather, medical information, character information, measurables, testing, but we do have an initial board set right now.
How much does that board change?
We try not to make drastic changes, Paul, on it, but some of the medical information obviously will affect that. Some of the testing does move guys up and down the board a little bit. But we try not to make drastic measures. We want to be a tape-driven team and really not just depend on these other variables that come in.
So what kind of drive or rise would you see a guy make off of something, barring a huge...
Small moves, yeah.
Hey, if you're with the national...